Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to College Football Across the Nation. I am your host, Phil Nunziata. With me, as always, is Ryan Mock. There was a lot of headlines in the college football world. Let's run them down. USC finally gets rid of Lane Kiffin. What does this mean for them going forward? Find out which team in our beloved Sunshine State is being accused of dirty play. Speaking of the Sunshine State, South Carolina exit Bright House Stadium in Orlando with a win, but at what cost? All this and more on College Football Across the Nation that starts right now. Hello all, and welcome to College Football Across the Nation, Episode 7. I'm your host, Phil Nunziata. With me, as always, is Ryan Mock. And as I said in the intro, a lot of headlines on and off the field this week. The biggest one coming down on the West Coast. USC finally cans Lane Kiffin.
Well, it's big news in the West Coast. USC, the big dog out there usually, but as we know, they fall on hard times, and they lost 62-41 to Arizona State. USC wastes no time to get rid of Lane Kiffin. It'll be interesting to see what this means moving forward, but in my opinion, I think it was a long overdue move and what USC needed to do because they are struggling bad, and it doesn't seem like their players are responding to Lane Kiffin. And I think it's a good move for USC. We'll have to see how they do moving forward.
Well, obviously, when something like this happens, the first thing you have to think of is who will be the next coach. Obviously, it looks like they might attempt an interim basis type of situation right now. There's a lot of guys that could really jump into the situation. A lot of guys that have been thrown in this list are people from the NFL, most notably Jeff Fisher has been mentioned being a USC alum. But there's a lot of guys in the pros. And you know, if a pro guy was going to make the jump, as some people would see, down a level, it's for a job like this. Because no matter how bad USC is, it's always going to be a top 5 job in the country.
Oh, yeah, USC, just the name alone brings the spotlight. Like I say, West Coast, you think of USC. Yes, recently they've dropped, but they can recruit out there. I know they're down right now, but everything was down under Lane Kiffin. If somebody like a Jeff Fisher, I've heard that name thrown out there. I've heard other coaches from the NFL level, former coaches, talk about going to USC. It would be big for USC to get one of those guys because they need somebody that can come in and instill some discipline in this program, some life back in it. I mean, if you watch a game in USC in their house, it's dead. The band usually is up playing their dun 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 song. You know, just lately it doesn't seem like it's inspired football from USC. I don't know if Kiffin kind of bored the fans with his style of offense. He never really found a quarterback. They tried running a pro-based offense. It never worked. They needed a kickstart, a new slate to start over, and for the rest of the year, they'll probably go with a coach by committee type thing, you know, from their school, offense coordinator, defense coordinator. You have to be seeing what they do for the rest of the year, but you have to say after the year, they're probably going to look to hire somebody, a big name, to come in for the Trojans.
Well, Lane Kiffin leaves USC after a 3-2 start this year, as you mentioned. Upon returning home from a road loss against Arizona State, 62-41, pretty much right off the plane, he was released. You know, hey, at least they gave him a ride home. You look at this schedule, and Lane Kiffin was 28-15 in his 4 years with the Trojans. Not terrible, but not USC level football.
That's not getting the job done. They're wanting to win national championships, top 5 in the nation. 15 losses in 4 years. It's more like usually 15 losses in 10 years for USC. Right. That's just a load of losses, and they're losing a lot of conference games. Usually USC, when they lose, they usually dominate the Pac-12. They might lose to a big out-of-conference game, a big bowl game. You know, it happens. But they're getting beat by Arizona State. All these teams in the Pac-12 have caught up to them. And quite frankly, they're just a middle-of-the-pack, if best, Pac-12 school right now. And that's just not USC football. It's time to make a move. And they wasted no time, as you mentioned. I think it'll jumpstart the team from here. I don't think Lane Kiffin... You don't hear a lot of guys say, yeah, you know, he was tough with him, but we liked him. We liked playing for him. We liked playing hard for him. You don't hear a lot of their players saying that. You don't hear people that are close to the program saying out Lane Kiffin. Everybody's washed their hands of him. It seemed like it was just kind of a mild set manner out there. No enthusiasm out of him at all. And it's not USC-style football. They need to right the ship and get this thing rolling because there's some teams in the Pac-12, including UCLA, their big-time rival, in the same area as them that are moving fast. So USC needs to get it rolling here pretty quick.
Yeah, you know, USC last year started out as the best team in the country at preseason number 1, dropping to a 7-6 bowl loss in the Sun Bowl to Georgia Tech. And now there's a lot of people thinking they're not even the best team in their own state, which has really been the case. for as long as we can remember. And Lane Kiffin has always been looked at as someone whose attitude was very hard to get along with. Even just arriving at USC was drenched in controversy after just up and leaving. I believe it was the Oakland Raiders.
And then Tennessee.
And then Tennessee after that.
Hired his dad, Monty Kiffin.
And it was just a very, everything he's done has just left more and more question marks. And, anyone will tell you, any veteran coach or player will tell you, if you're winning, you put up with the attitude. I'm sure there was plenty of successful programs that have coaches that aren't, Nick Saban, I don't think he's the nicest guy. He doesn't, if you drop a pass or something, he's not going to, pat you on the head and say you'll do better next time. He's going to chew into you. But you win and you respect him for doing so. So you see things like that. And Lane Kiffin, I really want to know what's next for him. I think his days as a head coach are done, at least for now. He has to have someone to pull the strings, someone he needs to answer to, because in every situation where he's been the head guy, it just hasn't worked out.
Yeah, following up on your point, it seems he's got a brilliant offensive mind, even though the stats don't back it up. But he's a good offensive coordinator, in my opinion. It just, as a football coach, a head football coach, you're the leader of the team. You're what the kids look up to get you fired up, to keep you on the right path. The kids want to see in their head coach a love for their team. So I want to play hard for it. And when you look at Lane Kiffin, even on the sideline, he just has a blank stare on his face. It just seems like he is involved in what he's doing. He doesn't ever get involved with the defense. And kids see that, and like, man, I want to play for a coach that gets fired up for all phases of the game. It just seems like he's a coordinator. He doesn't seem to be a head coach to me. If he does, I don't see it at the major level. Right. Maybe a middle of the pack team, if he can build one of them kids or one of them schools up and try to move up from there if he wants to be a head coach. But to me, Lane Kiffin is a coordinator. You got to be a leader of men as a head football coach, and I just don't see the fire that Lane Kiffin it takes to be successful.
I mean, you talked about hiring his dad back in the day. His father, one of the great coordinators of his time and of any time on both levels. Monty Kiffin, of course, you're talking about, Super Bowl champion with the Bucs and many other successful programs at the college and pro level. There's nothing wrong with being a very good coordinator, that aside from being the head coach. But you talk about someone who's really just more concerned with his offense and doesn't, give a lot of attention personally to his defense, which was not more apparent than it was last week when they gave up 62 points to Arizona State. And the interesting thing about this is a lot of people are forgetting this. I'm not going to defend this team. They have a lot of problems. But here's a team that does have a winning record right now. I'm not sure exactly, going forward who's going to take the realms for this season. As you said, I think it's more of a committee. I believe I'd imagine the offensive coordinator, typically takes over a lot of the duties just because he's usually more, especially right now, more involved with the head coach in meetings and such. But this is a team, they have a winning record, 3 more games, they go to a bowl game, which is not what USC looks for. They don't play for bowl games, they play for championships. But here's a team, depending on how much they turn it around, it could be really, it could be apparent very quickly that it was, in fact, Kiffin holding them down, because they can rebound and have a very successful season, even based off what they have left.
Yeah, and following up on that point, you can. A lot of people say, the scholarship deductions, that could be a big role or why they're not playing good. Well, yeah, that could be true, but I look at Penn State, for example, right, with Bill O'Brien, the way his staff is handling their business in Penn State. When you look at Penn State, they play hard. When I see USC, I just don't see a lot of kids enthused and playing hard. I think that's got to do with direction of the head coach. Yes, the scholarships do hurt you in the college level,
absolutely,
but you're still in SC. You're still USC. You can still recruit, and you can still play enthusiast football. Like when I look at the Nittany Lions and watch them play on Saturday, it's a totally different ball game when you watch the two programs play. And I think it directly, in my opinion, it has to do with Lane Kiffin. They need to get somebody that will fire him up and get this program back heading in the right direction. Even if they need to stop feeling sorry for themselves.
Exactly.
Play hard ball, play tough, and see where it goes from there. Move needed to be made, and USC, they're going to look to start a new chapter and try to leave this one in the past, because it's the dark era in USC football right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think it's a great comparison between them and Penn State. Obviously, Penn State having a, much harsher penalty than USC could even imagine. I would hate to see USC with the type of sanctions that Penn State got. I don't know that they would have won a game yet this year with that type of situation. But you compare them to Penn State, and you see the difference in just the morale around the team. You see someone, Bill O'Brien, was a coordinator himself before this, with the New England Patriots, one of the most successful offenses in football in recent memory. And, when all those sanctions came down, he actually had a clause in his contract that with those severe penalties, his length of contract actually increased. So right from the get-go, you knew that this was a guy that was here to stay. After going 8-4 last year, he could have picked and choose any job he wanted from the job he did. He decided to stay where he's at, and he's a guy that's fully committed, and you just don't see that from Lane Kiffin. Definitely a great comparison. Total polar opposites between the two programs. We're going to make the transfer down here to the Sunshine State over here. We had Miami and USF. In the game itself, pretty lackluster, Miami winning 49-21. And that's not really the story here. The big story is what happened after the game. Stephen Morris was injured in this game midway through the second quarter and had accused the USF Bulls, who are now 0-4, of playing dirty. He was asked after the game why that was his opinion. And just to pull his quote up here, he says, "South Florida's a dirty team. When you're down there and you're tackled and everyone's on top, they're going to try and go for your ankles. We were up 3 to 4 touchdowns. Ain't no point for me to mess with them. Those guys just play dirty." You don't hear about this very often. He was then asked from the USF reporting later on to comment on his comments immediately after the game to see if his opinion has changed. And he simply said, "It is what it is. I wanted to score 70 on them. They disrespected us, so I have no respect for them. And at that point, I just feel like we should keep pushing and keep killing them." Ryan, what do you make? A lot of teams are seen as dirty teams in the past, and Stephen Morris, of course, probably frustrated he was not able to finish this game. He has had a few injuries throughout this season alone. But what do you make of Stephen Morris really calling out the Bulls, calling them dirty players?
Well, it's very interesting, and I have to make this point, Phil. I mean, this goes off a topic, but is it weird or is it just me? A Miami player calling another school dirty? I don't know. It sounds weird to me. It's
if anything,
chuckle. But
if a Miami team is calling you dirty, they probably know what they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, that's off point. I just had to throw that point in there real quick.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at this USF program, they were pretty good there for a while. Fired their coach, and now they're 0-4. I don't believe that Stephen Morris would just call them out. I believe there probably is some truth to it.
Right.
I mean, they've gotten walloped. In their 4 games, they haven't even really come close to winning a game yet.
Right. The closest game they've had, they lost by 18 points.
Yeah, that's just, they're not getting the job done. And then they're getting embarrassed again to Miami, who, when they were pretty good, they were beating Miami. It just goes to show how much they've fallen recently. And, when you hear players call out other players like this, usually football players a lot of times have respect for one another. Mm-hmm. They respect them as a football player, as an athlete, as a program, what they're trying to do. They all usually have the common goal, especially at major football college level. They want to go to the NFL. But I see there probably is something going on here at USF, and you have to look inside the program, their coaching staff. What is the meaning for this? Yeah, you can be a hard physical team and hit somebody, but you got to win football games, and you have to show that you can play with these teams. And if this is true about USF, they got a lot of soul searching to do. We've talked about it before how much they've fallen, but it's really bad in USF right now.
Yeah, you look at Miami, pretty much being as good as they have been in a while, undefeated for the first time in quite a while. And you could just see these games where as you mentioned, I don't think Steve Morris would just make this up. Obviously, they won this game handily, 49-21, previously mentioned. No reason to bring this up if it wasn't an actual factor. Talking about twisting ankles and piles. You do have those teams when they fall behind, they just try to make an impact somehow, which usually comes out in the wrong way. But it will be interesting to watch and see what happens here. And like you said, for Miami to say this, obviously they're not the Miami of old, but Stephen Morris really calling them out, and maybe this will open some officials' eyes if they have to do USF games, maybe pay a little bit more attention. And if we start seeing the increase of personal fouls for USF, we could definitely show that this was truth, and Stephen Morris was telling the truth when he threw all this out there in the public.
Yeah, and if you're South Florida, at what point are you fed up with what you are?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're just terrible right now. I was watching this game a little bit, and they weren't even slowing Miami down. They looked like they were disinterested.
Mm-hmm.
And you start getting that through the program. You start getting that through all the players. Like, man, it's going bad right now. And they're young kids. They're 18 to 21 years old. They're bound to do some dirty things. Yeah, I don't agree with it. But I think it's directly with their performance on the field. If they're winning the game, if they're in a tough game, they're probably not doing this.
Yeah, you're probably not trying to hurt someone. You're just trying to win the game.
It's a direct fact that they're just not a good football team right now. And it's pretty low to take it out on not just Stephen Morris, anybody when you're trying to break somebody's ankle. You hit somebody, you play football, hard-nosed football. I understand that, but That's when you're breaking ankles and breaking fingers and poking people in the eye at the bottom of the pile. It just there's no room for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what this game of football is all about. I'm all about physical football, but that's pretty sad right there. They need to USF really needs to look at themselves in the mirror and be like, yeah, this isn't the answer to turn around our program.
Right.
We need to go out there and try to win some football games, and it's pretty disgraceful for USF right now.
Yeah, we mentioned that Stephen Morris did not finish the game last week coming out in the second quarter. He does look like he will be playing this week, 3:30, against a 3-1 Georgia Tech team. Morris, you could say maybe not 100%, but is going to play through the pain. Just real quick while we have this up, what do you think of this game, Georgia Tech, Miami Hurricanes?
It could be a trap game for Miami. I mean, Georgia Tech, they run that option offense.
Right.
That can be a nightmare for a defensive coordinator to stop.
Right.
If you're not ready for them and prepared for them and well coached throughout the week, they can sneak up on you. They got a pretty and they can. The thing about Georgia Tech is when they get rolling, not only do they wear their defense out, they don't get the ball from them because they run an option offense. They're going to keep on the ground a lot, and it's going to keep that high-powered Miami offense on the sideline. But I do think Miami will win the game.
Mm-hmm.
But if Miami's not ready for them, doesn't get up for them, it could be a trap game. It is in Miami, so that'll help them. But we'll see how mature this Miami football team is. They're really for real. They got to win these ACC games. They're getting an ACC coastal schedule right now, and Georgia Tech's not an easy team to play. I think they got more talent across the board than Georgia Tech, but they'll need to be ready to go if they want to walk away with a win against Georgia Tech.
Well, it is always tricky with those option teams because if you don't see it very often, it can really throw you for a loop. That's why you see teams like Air Force and Navy, those academies, which I will get to later because a very interesting story has come up with the Naval Academy teams or just academy teams in general. But the point of that, option teams, you see at least once a year a team like Navy, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech last year beating USC. There's always that one team who's just not ready for the option, and they can really pay for it because you think you have somebody down, that ball pops out to an open man, and he's off to the races. The option is very difficult to defend, especially on a team. It's one thing if you have an option package, but if 60, 70, 80% of your offense is an option, that means you probably run it fairly well, and if you get it down to perfection, it can really throw a wrench in somebody's season, like a number 14 Miami.
Yeah, you have to be disciplined on defense. And the thing about these option teams, when they do decide to throw, they usually have something set up for you. They'll set it up with what they do. See the quarterback fake it inside, hand off to the fullback, pull it out, and they usually have a guy wide open. You have to be all around disciplined on defense. Miami's been playing great football so far. They'll need to keep it up if they want to keep it rolling against the Yellow Jackets on Saturday.
Yeah, definitely a game. The best quote I've ever heard about for an option team is you cannot contain the option, you have to attack it. You cannot read and react to an option because they read your reactions. That in most cases, the defense is going off of what the offense does. The option is one of the few formations where you look at the defense and your play unravels as the way the defense plays. So really, you have to attack it. If you're going to make mistakes, you have to do it aggressively. You have to attack this option offense for any team that runs it, and we'll see if Miami can do that. We're going to take a little trip, couple hours now, from Miami up I-4 to Orlando, where a very good game was played last week. South Carolina getting a 28-25 win over my UCF Knights. Very good game. I have no gripes about this game. UCF was up 10-0 at halftime. South Carolina exploded in the third quarter, 21 points, and then they pulled ahead early in the fourth. As much as 28-10, UCF did start to come back a little bit, pulling it close at the end. Had an onside kick that they were not able to recover. That was the end of this game. But one of the more important things about this is, yes, South Carolina got out with a 28-25 win, but really the big story is Connor Shaw left the game in the first quarter on the first drive with a shoulder injury, originally labeled to be out 2 to 3 weeks. But now Steve Spurrier is saying there is a possibility that he could play as early as this week. I don't know what to make of this, Ryan. What do you think if someone's going from a 2 to 3 week injury to jumping right away? What would you think about him coming in here? Because if nothing else, he can't be 100%.
No, he's banged up. You saw how he was walking around the sideline. He looked like he was in pain just walking around the sideline.
The ice patch and everything for the whole game.
It didn't look good for him. And in my opinion, the same as any given Saturday or any given Sunday, you can lose a football game. But in my opinion, I think that South Carolina should rest him this week. Mm-hmm. They play Kentucky at home. Kentucky's not doing very well right now. They're down. Right. Coach Stoops is trying to build them up. But they're at home. I think they should rest him, go to a ground ground and pound style of offense, control the ball. We saw what happened on Saturday when they started running the ball. They have a pretty good running team. Why not give Connor Shaw a week to rest? They're at home against Kentucky. Their defense should play good in that game. They should be able to handle them at home. Because the reason saying that is after that, they go on a 3-week stretch. And these are all Saturdays in a row, no bye week. They go at Arkansas, at Tennessee, and at Missouri. Tennessee isn't what they once were, but they can still be a tough team in Neyland Stadium. There's aren't any one of those 3 games they could get beat. Mm-hmm. So you need a healthy Connor Shaw out there if they want to go through this streak undefeated, because they can't afford to lose in the SEC again with Georgia. They already lost to Georgia, and they have Georgia to lose twice now. They have to run the table in the SEC, or else they're not going to do what they want to do, and that's being Atlanta for the SEC championship at the end of the year. I think they should rest him against Kentucky. Get him a week. Get that shoulder to heal up a little bit. Come back ready to play at Arkansas and the rest of their schedule. But if he can go, Steve Spurrier has always been a go-getter coach. He's never been a type of guy that just sits back and he always wants to attack you. He's been that way since I've watched him. Starting at Florida, he always wants to be aggressive, and that's just evident if Connor Shaw does play against Kentucky at home this Saturday.
Yeah, and the schedule does not get that much easier. Well, the last 3 games of the year for them, 2 of them are against top 20 opponents, number 18 at the moment, Florida, and number 3, Clemson, who's playing as good as just about anybody in the country. And you mentioned this game, they were able to get the win against UCF, but when you look at it, there was plenty of questions to be had for this team. They had 4 turnovers, of course, when their quarterback went out. Their backup played fairly well. They really relied a lot on the run game, which is what got them out of this game, which I'm sure is something they would do if the backup was in, again this week. But I agree with you. I think Connor Shaw has, earned the right to rest. I don't see a point. If they were playing Arkansas or Tennessee this week and you needed him, totally understandable, but I think you can get it done without Connor Shaw versus Kentucky at home, and you definitely need him for the games down the road.
Yeah, and if he's ready to go this week, why not give the other kid a shot in the first half? If it's not going the way you want to, if you need him to come in there, he's a senior. He should be able to lead his team from a tough situation. Just have him ready to go with the second teamer and see where it goes from there. And they should be able to take care of business. If you name, he would be available to play. But I think they could get the job done with the second team quarterback this week at home against Kentucky.
Yeah, I do think it would be the bet, but again, that's why Spurrier's a coach, and we're sitting here. Maybe he knows something we don't. It's just interesting to me to go from being injured 2 to 3 weeks to coming back in 6 days.
I know, and it's weird against Kentucky too.
Right, it's not something that you think they'd have to hurry him back to do.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting point. We'll have to turn into the game and see who plays, what they do, but if I know anything about Coach Spurrier, if he says he's going to play, he's probably going to play. So it'll be interesting to see what South Carolina does. And they need these wins, all these wins they can get. Every game in the SEC is important because they still, in the SEC with 1 loss, they have everything ahead of them. But they do need some work on offense if they're gonna do that, because UCF did hit them in the mouth on Saturday. They held them scoreless in the first half. It took the running game to get going in the second half. But UCF had them on the ropes. And it'll be interesting to see how South Carolina goes from here. Maybe Spurrier don't think that South Carolina can play good without their starter with Shaw, but it'll be interesting to see from what they do from here.
Yeah, they definitely relied a lot on their run game to help get them back in the game against UCF. But credit to Steve Spurrier. He really understood the significance of this game, and he was quoted after the game saying, "We're lucky to get out of Orlando with a win," and I think that was very classy of him to say, saying he was very impressed with UCF, George O'Leary, and the way they conducted themselves. Very good game overall for UCF. They've won the big one a couple times, but a lot of the regular season big games they've fallen just short in the past couple of years. UCF looking to rebound this week. I wouldn't want to be a Memphis Tiger as they play them 4:30 on Saturday.
Yeah, I look for UCF to come out and take care of business in that one.
I think the biggest game, we had a few off. With Lane Kiffin being fired, we had a few off-the-field topics to bring up this week. And really, I think the biggest just on-field game, of course, had to have been the instant classic that is Georgia versus LSU. And a lot to be said about this game. 2 quarterbacks that were once teammates at Georgia. Zach Mettenberger, of course, starting his career at Georgia, transferring to LSU, becoming the top dog there. In a 44-41 thriller, Georgia takes this one. Ryan, what'd you see here?
I loved sitting back and watching this game. This is probably the best game I've seen in a long time, and the quarterback play was sensational. Both offenses. In the SEC, it's interesting to see how the offenses have taken control of the defense. Usually, forever in the SEC, it's been defense, defense, defense. Get your points when they come.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be patient. But the quarterback play. You want to talk about two kids that are NFL talent?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Zach Mettenberger, he threw for 372 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. And Aaron Murray, we've talked about him all year. He's a Heisman candidate. And since that Clemson game where people were questioning if he could win the big game, has he silenced his critics? 20 of 34, 298, 4 touchdowns, threw 1 pick, didn't hurt him. And the last drive, LSU went down there, took the lead, and came right back. Aaron Murray hit a strike on the right sideline. Can't say enough about how these two quarterbacks went at each other all game. And for Mettenberger coming back to Georgia where he wanted to play growing up, he got his chance to do that. Murray won the job over him. Great performance by both the quarterbacks. It was a great game to watch. It's sad there had to be a loser, but a big win for Georgia as they move down the road. Their schedule kind of eases up a little bit until they play Florida. Big win for the Bulldogs, and they have a chance to do what they're set out to do, go to the SEC title game, and maybe beyond if they can beat probably Alabama.
Yeah, you mentioned, Aaron Murray, just, the way the schedule started, Georgia could have been buried early on based on what they have. Coming out of, this, gauntlet of an opening schedule with 1 loss, I mentioned it last week, Georgia has to have the opinion of what else could you throw at me that you haven't already thrown at me. Surviving this game versus LSU, Aaron Murray, you said 4 touchdowns, had another one on the ground. He's just playing sensationally. And as you said, their schedule really does open up until towards the end of the year when they play Florida. This is a team that could go in with 1 loss. And, from last year, we've even noticed that they can, hold the torch to Alabama. And Alabama isn't as good as they were last year. They've definitely, been hit significantly in some areas, even though A.J. McCarron is playing better this year than last year. But as a team, you could definitely say, that they're not as good of a team. They play Vanderbilt, they play Tennessee, Missouri, Vanderbilt. Then they have a big game against Florida, and then even after that, Appalachian State, Auburn, Kentucky, Georgia Tech, all very winnable games. As long as they don't stumble, this is a 1-game season and a game against a Florida team that also I feel isn't as good as last year, and they were able to beat them last year.
I was sitting here thinking, I think Georgia's going to play Alabama in the SEC title game, and then winner that game will probably play in the national championship. Because I don't see Georgia losing here on out. I just don't. The only team that I can see that can play with them is Florida, and that's in Jacksonville, neutral site, and Georgia's better than Florida.
Right.
Florida hasn't faced a great offense other than Miami. Yeah, yes, Florida does have a sensational defense. Their offense is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not very explosive right now. Their defense wins them games, and the senior leadership of Aaron Murray, Florida feeds off of turnovers. I just don't see him turning it over that much.
Yeah, they don't turn it over much in Georgia.
And with this schedule, it wins over South Carolina, LSU, Florida, and if they beat Alabama, I would see Georgia punching their ticket to the national championship. It's an interesting point because there are other teams out there, but you know how the BCS loves the SEC. Really interesting to see, but I don't see the Dogs losing until maybe Alabama. I don't have a prediction for that game yet. Of course, a lot of stuff has to happen. I have to watch more ball. But as of right now, I see Georgia running the table the rest of the regular season.
Well, I think that's, I think it's a safer bet to say they will than to say they won't. I think, they've earned that type of respect. And, you mentioned, the BCS loves SEC even with 1 loss. But this 1 loss is a 3-point loss in the opening week of the season. By the end of the season, if they win all these games, if they've already beaten South Carolina, beat LSU, if they beat Florida somewhat handily, that 1 loss is almost not going to matter.
Yeah, and that was at Clemson, too.
Exactly.
And Clemson is great. So, and they missed the field goal in that game, too, that they could have made. So, look at that schedule, very manageable from here on out. It's going to be hard to keep the Dogs out of the national championship if they run the table. And a great job by Mark Richt, their head coach. You hear a lot of people a couple years ago wanted his job. There were a lot of people like, here we go again when they lost to Clemson. But since then, you see a lot of maturity in this Bulldog team. Aaron Murray, you got to feel good for him. He deserves this. Mm-hmm. And let's see if he can keep it going from here on out, which I believe they will be able to.
I never had much of an opinion on Georgia just in years of watching, like if they played Florida, I would typically cheer for Georgia, but every week I'm just becoming more and more of a supporter of this team. You just watch them, and they really have bought into the system. They bought in to everything going on there. Aaron Murray, being a fan of UCF and being a student and whatnot, when UCF beat them, Georgia, I always thought, it was a big name and it was a great thing. And ever since then, I've kind of looked at how they've done since, and they've lost NFL talent every year since then. AJ Green being in that game, in the Liberty Bowl against UCF, they've lost him. They've lost plenty of NFL caliber talent, and they just, your favorite quote ever, the good teams don't rebuild, they reload. And Georgia has done nothing but reload since then and before then. And this is, a very special team, because even if they were to go to the SEC championship and lose like they did last year, they're going to go to the Sugar Bowl. Because the team that wins that game will go to the BCS championship, and then whoever doesn't is more than, Georgia, if they run the table, they're going to at least get a BCS bowl berth, and they're going to deserve it regardless of which game it is.
Yeah, absolutely, especially managing the schedule. And Phil, in your opinion, who is playing the best ball in the nation right now? Like, yeah, there's undefeated teams. Alabama's undefeated. Oregon's undefeated. Who do you think is playing the best ball right now? It'd be hard-pressed not to say Georgia. You can come with maybe Oregon or Clemson, but you have to put them in the top three. In your opinion, who do you think is playing the best right now as we speak?
Well, I think you named the three. I mean, Oregon always looks like it's going 100 miles. It's a train going 100 miles an hour, and the brake pedal's been ripped off. They're just always moving so fast. But that's every year. And then when they play teams like Stanford, they find the brake pedal, they sew it back on, and they slam it down hard. That's just what teams seem to be doing. Oregon always starts good out the gate. I haven't seen anything from them this year that I haven't seen in years past where they ended up stumbling late in the year. So they are what they are. They deserve their ranking, where they are. It's definitely between Clemson and Georgia, and, I guess you can give the edge to Clemson because they beat Georgia. But aside from that, since we've already seen that game, if that game wasn't the opener of the season, I think that's the game everyone would have wanted to see, in a bowl game at the end of the year. But I don't know how you don't pick better than Georgia, because they're the most battle-tested. Take Alabama, give them Clemson, South Carolina, and LSU in a 4-week period, and tell me how they come out with it.
I don't think they come out as well as Georgia fared. I really don't.
So, they might not have to be the best team, but I think safe to say they are playing the best.
And you mentioned how Clemson beat them. You know what could happen. We could have a rematch in the national championship. And I think this could be a national championship if this does happen. Got a lot of football to play. But when Alabama played LSU, I was like, man, this is a great game. But I don't think anybody, unless you're a team that finishes third or fourth, but as an outsider, that would see this national championship and not be glued and be like, wow, look at these two quarterbacks, look at these two teams do battle. Mm-hmm. That would be interesting to see if these two teams met up again in the national championship game.
I mean, stranger things have happened. We've seen Alabama and LSU play, in the SEC championship, and then for some reason Alabama was still given a national championship berth, ended up beating LSU the second time around. It was very weird to see, them play twice in 1 year, being even in the same conference. But stranger things have happened. I think that would be great to see. Definitely Oregon will have something to say about it. To some extent, Stanford, the winner of that game, because people are pretty much handing the championship to one of those two teams of that conference. There's some Pac-12 teams that are want to say something about it. But Georgia, you'd be very hard pressed to find a team playing any better than the Bulldogs are right now.
And I just think the momentum's going to keep on growing and growing and growing, because the schedule from here on out, they should be able to handle them, because they're better football teams than anybody left, in my opinion, on their regular season schedule. From here on out, they have to play good ball. Georgia can hiccup. I just don't see it. I think they're a different team this year. And I would be interesting to see if they can beat Alabama if they meet them again in the SEC championship. In my opinion, right now I think they are a better football team than the Crimson Tide. I just do. I like what I see out of Aaron Murray. Their defense has some room to improve. But right now, Georgia, if you had to ask me who the best team in the nation is, I would say Clemson or Georgia. And I'd probably just say Georgia because they're more battle-tested, even though Clemson didn't beat them. Because if that game's in Athens, 3 points could go either way.
So a neutral site, you think Georgia takes Clemson?
Right now I do, because they're so battle-tested. Right now I don't see anything that Georgia, what you mentioned, they've been through it all. And I see this could be the year that they are, let's right the ship. Let's get a championship. We need it here in Georgia. Right now I'd have to say Georgia, in my opinion.
Neutral site, Georgia winning, that's a fair assumption. Moving on to the games to look forward to this week, we got a really good one early on. You can wake up, have your Cheerios, turn on the TV, and this game's already going to be starting. We have number 25 Maryland going to Doak Campbell Stadium, Bobby Bowden Field, to play number 8 Florida State, who won a barn burner last week against Boston College. Boston College jumped on them early. Jameis Winston and the Noles right the ship. The play that has been posted on YouTube everywhere, is the Hail Mary at the end of the half, to pull even farther ahead. Winning 48-34, again, in a barn burner that definitely throws a few question marks, maybe waking up the defense of the Noles. But they play a Maryland team who's playing fairly good, better than, in years past. Also undefeated 4-0. Florida State 4-0, 2 wins already in the ACC. How do you see this one breaking down?
Maryland's coming off of a bye week as well.
Mm-hmm.
And last week we saw Boston College was coming off a bye week. Florida State draws 2 teams in a row coming off of bye weeks. And Florida State, there's a knock on them. They have a great offense. Their defense, you're used to Florida State having a top-notch defense. They have talent on defense, but they're young, and they're under Jeremy Pruitt, which is a brand new defensive coordinator. I think they're still trying to get their feet wet with him, in these games, facing teams that's been well prepared for them off of a bye week, and they're young. So that's the knock on Florida State right now. I think Boston College exploited. We saw them doing a lot of misdirection that Florida State was over pursuing on, and Maryland's got better talent right now than Boston College.
Mm-hmm.
It is in Doak Campbell Stadium, which will help FSU, but Maryland could come in there and run a little trickeration on them, try to get something going early. They're going to have Randy Essel's going to have something up his sleeve for this Maryland team early to try to jump on Florida State.
Or they could just shock them with the crazy uniforms Maryland's always wearing. I don't know who designs these things, but every week it makes me shake my head more and more.
That is a good point. But back to it, Maryland coming off of a bye week, they will come in there ready to go, but over 4 quarters. Do you think Maryland's going to be... I know they're playing great defense. I hear about how Maryland's defense is. Over 4 quarters, you think that Jimbo and Jameis Winston in that offense, I just don't see them holding them down for 4 quarters. I think Florida State has a little bit... Well, not a little bit. They have more firepower than Maryland. And over 4 quarters at home, Maryland, that's some heat down there in Tallahassee, too, that they're not used to in Maryland. They might wilter away with the depth and the second-teamers. I look for Florida State to win this game, but I think Maryland will hang with them for a while coming off of a bye week. It'll be interesting to see because Florida State's young on defense and they have a lot of improvement, and Maryland might exploit that early in the game.
Yeah, I think Maryland definitely can go blow to blow with Florida State. I think the question, as you mentioned, is just for how long. You look at this game, being a home game, Florida State, definitely big. I don't think you'd want to play, in Maryland because this team is as good as they've been in years. And, I think if you were in that stadium, that would be very apparent just how good this team's playing. Not more can be said about. They're doing a phenomenal job. I don't think anybody had Maryland where they are right now at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, they're doing a great job. Randy Etzel, he was the coach at UConn when they went to the Fiesta Bowl and lost to Oklahoma, and you see where that program's gone from there.
Yep.
And he comes to Maryland.
They just released their coach
exactly
this week.
And he comes to Maryland, who really has come from nowhere. Last year, we thought of Maryland. You thought about the crazy uniforms and a linebacker playing quarterback, and then a year later, they're in the top 25, and a lot of people thinking they have a puncher's chance to go into Doak Campbell Stadium and beat the Florida State Seminoles. You would not have heard that last year. You would have heard this is going to be butt kicking. But this year, just the credit to Randy Esel and his program, what has Maryland doing, and they're going to the Big Ten next year. Big Ten, maybe a little more TV audience. You play Ohio State's and Penn State's and Michigan's week to week to week. That could help in recruiting as well, being in that conference. So Randy also has this Maryland program on the rise right now.
Did you say that a linebacker playing quarterback?
Yeah, you don't remember that last year?
What was that about?
Well, Maryland, their starting quarterback got hurt, and then it went through like 2 more backup quarterbacks who got hurt, and then Dave O'Brien transferred because he was a starter 2 years ago, and he transferred before the year. So they went through the 1, 2, 3 quarterbacks, man transferred,
right?
And then they had nobody on their roster, and they had a linebacker playing quarterback.
Was he any good?
Not really. He just pretty much got the ball in the shotgun and ran out the middle and tried to kill somebody. But, it was a fiasco for Maryland. I remember Florida State went there last year. It was ridiculous, but this year it's definitely different. But you don't hear that very much.
No.
A linebacker playing quarterback. It's very interesting. It goes along good with the uniforms. Very
right.
It's
wacky as uniforms. I remember last year with Penn State when they were still trying to get their scholarships together. I watched a linebacker return a punt, and it was probably one of the most entertaining things I've seen in quite some time.
Well, tell me about it. How did it go?
Well, anyway, back on topic with this. Florida State, playing very well. They win a barn burner again against Boston College. They have very tough next, really 4 games because they got Maryland, they got Clemson, NC State you can't sleep on, and Miami. So, you look at these games, this is really going to show you, who Florida State is and what are they going to be the rest of the year. This is a team, obviously, I mean, on average right now, they're winning games 51-15, just based on their scoring points for and points against. So, they're averaging a blowout a game at the moment. But this is really where their schedule picks up. No more Bethune-Cookmans, no more, things like that. They have a little bit of a open up later in the season. They play Wake Forest, Syracuse, not as good as expected, Idaho, before they get ready to play Florida in the Swamp to end the year, as they always do. But, in this game, I see Florida State winning this game, but my only question is, when I look down one level, they do play Clemson next, so there is a possibility that they're looking past Maryland. At the beginning of the year, you look at the schedule and you could probably kind of check Maryland off, but they're playing a lot better than anyone expected. You can't look past Maryland no matter how big the next game is.
And we do know with Florida State, I know as well as anybody watching FSU every week, they do have sometimes games where they don't show up against somebody they should beat.
Right.
Even Maryland's better than these teams that they've lost to in years past as well.
Right.
So they do have an off week next week, which I think if the game was in Death Valley next week in Clemson would be even more your case. Your point, it would be a little more valid.
It definitely helps them having a bye week.
But they have a bye week, so, they're like, we need to focus on this game. I'm sure Jimbo Fisher and his staff is preaching to these kids, this is a good quality football team. They're coming in there to prove a point, and this would be a huge win for Maryland's program. So I'm sure that the coaching staff at FSU is preaching this to their kids. And this is, you mentioned the next 4 weeks for Florida State. This is, Florida State's one of those teams that's lingering. They've been at number 8 for about 3 weeks now.
Right.
A lot of people, we think they have a lot of firepower on offense. Their defense has some question marks with being young. I think we'll find out just what FSU is all about these next 4 weeks when they play number 25 Maryland. They go at Clemson, which will be a great atmosphere.
Absolutely.
The winner of that game probably has the inside track to win the ACC Atlantic. And then you have NC State, which always gives FSU fits. And it's between Clemson and the next week, NC State, and then you get Miami.
Right.
So that NC State game could be a game that you can look at, too. You can't that's it, they should beat them, because that could be a trap game. So we'll find out a lot about this program, and just Jameis Winston, what we've seen so far, he's phenomenal. But we'll learn a lot more about him in these big stages with a national spotlight on him a little bit more. It was on Pitt, but these great teams that they're about to be playing, and see just what he stacks up against these teams. A lot to find out still about FSU moving forward.
Well, definitely a big month, ahead, as you said, to see what Florida State's made of, starting with number 25 Maryland, and who knows, we might see a linebacker play quarterback. It's happened before. A team that does not have any quarterback problems, as we've thought, is Ohio State, because they have quarterbacks for days, as Braxton Miller returned last week and shut up me, Ryan, and anyone else who thought there may have been a quarterback controversy, because he played phenomenal against Wisconsin. They won by a touchdown, but he played, very well in this game. Ohio State 5-0, a very quiet 5-0 for some reason, even though they're number 4. Braxton Miller returns with 4 touchdowns. They roll, to a win here. I think all that's kind of put to bed. I think that, they could always use the backup in some kind of wrinkle formations, Kenny Glenton. But I think Braxton Miller has reclaimed the spot as Urban Meyer's guy and Ohio State's, QB. And they're looking pretty good rolling down here.
Yeah, they're definitely surprising me. I can't lie to you, because remember, I didn't think Ohio State was what everybody thought they were.
And I agreed.
And lately, they've been playing really, really good ball. And their defense has been getting better each week. That was my major question. I always thought that they had a good explosive offense,
right,
no matter who was in there at quarterback. But their defense is starting to play good. They held Wisconsin to limited rushing yards. And Wisconsin, that's what they do. They like to run the ball. They put like 300 yards up a week. They held 104 rushing yards. That's big for Ohio State's defense. They got another big game coming up this week at Northwestern, and it's the game days there, so it'll be a great atmosphere to see if
game.
Yeah, if Northwestern can put up a challenge to Ohio State, and if Ohio State's really for real. I think Northwestern, it might sound a little weird, they're probably a little bit better than Wisconsin right now, because Wisconsin's got a new quarterback. They're young,
right,
but it'll be interesting to see if Northwestern can hang with them. And in that atmosphere in Northwestern, it won't be easy for Ohio State. I'll be tuned in. It could be a potential upset, but this week I think I'm going to have to change up a little bit, and I think Ohio State probably will win this football game. Just too much talent on offense, and their defense is improving each week.
Well, we've kind of been wrong all year picking against Ohio State, so maybe if we pick for them, that's when they'll fall. Who knows what happens there.
Then all my points I made early in the year will come true, and then I'll
after flip-flopping a couple times. But this to me is the definition of a trap game. night game at Northwestern. 60% chance of rain, which could be a big factor. Some sloppy football. I think Northwestern could win an ugly game more so than Ohio State, because Ohio State, they're very rhythmic with their offense. Everything goes according to plan.
Yeah, spread option.
It's when it doesn't that things could really fall apart for them. So I think, if it rains, if it's heavy, I think Northwestern's style better suits a sloppy football game.
Yeah, it does, because Ohio State loves to play good offense. But it will help Ohio State's defense, too, which I still have some questions and marks about. But if it is raining and it's a sloppy field, it does help Northwestern. It usually, in these games where the weather's a factor, it usually helps the underdog for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
It just, I don't know what it is. I guess for upsets to happen a lot, you got to force a lot of turnovers and get short fields, and you have to steal possessions. Mm-hmm. And you can create a lot of turnovers on a wet field. That'll help Northwestern try to get the ball from Ohio State, because it's going to be tough for them to stop them without Ohio State stopping themselves, because as Ohio State's proven so far this year, that they are very good offensively. And so if Northwestern is going to have a chance to win this game, they're going to have to steal some possessions, create some turnovers, and capitalize on every turnover that they get. And a sloppy field and wet conditions could help them moving forward in this football game.
Yeah, you look at this team, they're scoring around 40 points a game, which definitely will help them hang with Ohio State. Because Ohio State, when you think of them, you still think of offense, even though the defense has definitely come around. But you look at this team, again, 40 points a game, only giving up around 24. They've scored over 30 in every game they've played this year. So that really, helps them. And Northwestern, another team, I keep saying this, but they're playing as good as we've seen them in quite some time. Number 16 as high as they've been for a while. Big game for them. This is, when they got their schedule, definitely what they looked at, what they circled moving into it. I think Northwestern has as good a chance to beat Ohio State. Obviously, the weather could be a factor. I understand by now you might need to roll with Ohio State, but I think this game might just matter a little bit more. It is a toss-up. I say Northwestern by 4.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, we hear it here. I was going to ask you what your prediction is, because you're talking more and more and more, and it seems like going towards Northwestern. I was like, Phil, are you picking Northwestern? And you came out and shocked there. It's on tap, everybody. If Northwestern comes on and wins this game, opening statement next week. Well, I was right here. Phil will be calling that one. But
what it's okay? You're turning your tides. You're picking Ohio State for once. By how much? What's your spread here?
I'm gonna go Ohio State 35 to about. I think Northwestern will put some points up and down. I go Ohio State about 35 to 20 to 24. Somewhere in that range.
Okay, so you're thinking like a 9-point win, and I'm thinking 4. Okay, I think that's fair. Obviously, I think I'll say if it rains heavy, it might help a little bit more. Get the rain dance going down there in Northwestern. But I think some people forget, especially in that spread offense, because spread offenses are all about speed, and it's really hard to run in the mud.
If Musburger comes on in the air and he's like, "You are looking live at a sloppy and wet field," I'll be texting, "Hey Phil, it's going good so far." So we'll have to see what the weather is.
So
like.
60% rain. We'll see what happens there as Northwestern takes on Ohio State. Trying to get me to actually get a prediction right this year, and down here at Ryan Field. So Ryan, the next game we have going here, we have number 15 Washington and number 5 Stanford. Stanford playing as good as they have for a while. Also, Washington, another team who, very well has a puncher's chance to knock off Stanford, who's been playing very well. Both teams have. Who do you have a better chance of in this one, the Huskies or the Cardinals?
I'd say Stanford, just because I think they have the better talent. And it seems like the last few weeks, Stanford has been coming in their own. Last week, they played a tough game against Washington State, who had been on a roll, and they went out there and handled them. I think they are proven that they're handling these tough games, these games that could be trap games for them. And I look for Stanford. They'll probably pound them out a little bit. Washington is playing very good, but I just think Stanford at home is too much for the Washington to hang with. I look for Stanford rolling away in this game. I think they'll win by about 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, Washington, they beat number 19 ranked Boise State at the beginning of the year pretty handily, 38-6. Since then, not a lot of competition. Illinois, Idaho State, and Arizona, they won by a lot more than I thought they would have to. I think this roll does come to an end. I think Stanford wins this one And really, they could end up dropping their next 3 the way things are looking here because they play Stanford, Oregon, and Arizona State. Actually, okay, I'm sorry. I'm looking at this now. They play Stanford, then they have a bye week, and then they play Oregon, Arizona State. But still, that's 3 very tough games. They could easily go 4-0 to 4-3 to fighting to stay 500 as their schedule really gets tough more towards the end of the year.
Good grief. So, look at these, get off point a little here. You look at some of these schedules these teams have this year. It's like, whoa. You look at their schedule in the middle of the year. They have the schedule of a lot of these teams are just ridiculous this year. It seems like when they start playing tough teams like number 5, number 2, number 22, all in a row, and then they play Cal and Colorado and UCLA. Tough. If Washington's really for real, which some people think they are, we'll find out these next 3 weeks for sure because they have an opportunity to play some top-notch competition. And at Stanford and Oregon the next 2 weeks, they could really shake up the BCS if they're good enough to hang with these teams because it'll be interesting to see in that Pac-12. It's crazy stuff can happen out there, but the next 3 weeks of Washington will prove if they're really for real.
Yeah, I mean, I think these stretches are good for some teams because you look at a team like Georgia. When you get out of them, you come out playing. The level of football you're playing is just better than what you would have without it. You see some of these teams that don't really have as tough a schedule. And it's good for the wins, but when it comes down to it, you play these regular season games to get to those championship games at the end of the year. So if you're not tested all that much throughout the year, when you go to a team that's really seen it all already, that could end up being, an advantage for the team that had the tougher road to get there.
Yeah, teams will really come together. And if they play these tough games and they come together, teams always seem to rally around each other. And if you've been there in a tough situation, the tough games, you seem to bond together a little more. You have a little bit more of a family type attitude in these games. I don't see them being able to play with Stanford and Oregon. Though. I don't think Washington has the firepower or the athletes around. They might hang with them for a while, but I think it's going to, in my opinion, a tough couple of weeks coming up for the Huskies.
Yeah, I could see them maybe winning one, finding a way to win one of these games, but I think overall, it's something that they're really going to, they could easily end up 500 in the next month because they could just be so, an injury. You play all these tough teams in a row, injuries could potentially pile up. This could be a disaster for Washington. But we'll see. They've done very well so far. They've beaten one ranked team already this year, but we'll see what happens when they face Stanford later in the week. We have a small story here to mention, and I just thought this was interesting. I didn't really consider this when it happened. Probably the first and hopefully last time we talk anything close to politics on the show because I'm not a politics guy.
No, I can't stand politics. My opinion, but that's just me.
A lot of people, obviously, unless you lived under a rock, you've heard about the government shutdown from this past week. But something I didn't even consider was part of that shutdown could have been since the armed forces, of course, part of the government, there was a possibility that Army, Navy, and Air Force would have to suspend playing football games. And it just came out, the hammer came down today that they were still allowed to compete in these games for, as far as traveling goes. Navy and Air Force play, and then Army takes on Boston College, who's always really been a supporter of the academies, who has always played teams like Navy and Army, pretty consistently throughout the years. But I just thought that it'd be very interesting if that would have happened, that these teams weren't allowed to play due to this, governmental shutdown.
It's a great thing that they are able to play because these kids want to play football. They come, obviously they're serving our country, and that's what they go to the Army and the Navy to do. But the kids that play football, that's actually some pretty good, intense football if you sit down and watch it. And you want to see them be able to play. There's enough going on with the government that, let these kids go out there and play some football. I think it'd be ridiculous. I understand the circumstances, but just because this is going on, they can't go out and play a football game. I think it's good that they've come together. And I'm not exactly sure why it'd be shut down. I don't know the reason behind it.
From my understanding, is part of the academy's funding is of course through the government. So it was a matter of transportation because a good section of their funding, because these armed force academies don't have boosters like normal programs.
Right.
That's a lot through the government. So I understood it. I think it's good that everything is working out. Navy Air Force especially is a very good game. And you talk about some good football throughout these armed forces. You don't always get to look at the records of these teams to decide how good they are. I've missed national championship games. I've missed bowl games. I can't remember the last time I missed Army-Navy.
Yeah, you watch it every time.
Every game. And, and it's in, past couple years it's been at Lincoln Financial Field. I think they're moving to the new Meadowlands this year, which usually always played up in that northeast area. But, just big atmosphere, and it's an emotional moment because for a lot of guys, it's the last time they'll ever put on a helmet, and and they will add a different kind of helmet because a lot of kids, it'll be their senior year, and they'll leave and they'll go serve their sentence, that they've committed to in their service. So it's really an emotional time. Navy, I believe, has won 12 straight years, but it's always a close game. It's been less than a touchdown for the past 3-4 years that I remember off top hand. And I forget exactly which ESPN channel airs it, but they will play like the last 5 in marathon leading up to it.
Yeah.
So you can pretty much get the grasp of the whole history of it in one afternoon. And it's just fun. It's just a great game. It's what football is all about. And it's an emotional moment when you see that happen. And you look at teams like Army's 2-3, and then Navy, I believe, is 2-1 at the moment. Air Force, I don't have up at the moment. But the records isn't what you look for in these teams. You just look for great football against guys that are going to go on to do something more significant than playing football, really, with their lives once they're done living the dream of playing college football.
And the thing I love about watching these games is just, you watch football all the time, and then you watch these games, the talent might not be there, the football talent might not be there, but just how hard they play.
Mm-hmm.
These kids really care about playing football. And you want to talk about a team that unites together. These people unite together in something much more important than football.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get to watch them do it on the gridiron, it's very fun to watch these teams, how hard they play and how much they really care about the game of football.
Mm-hmm.
And when they go on the field and play, I love watching it. You don't usually see a lot of personal foul penalties, because if they do,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to get chewed out.
Right.
So it's good, clean, hard football, and it's what you love to see from these games. That's what I pick out most of the time, and the discipline, and it's just fun to watch these people go out there and play hard. And I'm glad that they can play this week, because I think it would be a tragedy and a shame if they can't enjoy a football on a Saturday the way they should because of what's going on with the government right now.
Yeah, honestly, I think the first time I ever watched college football, I think Air Force was in a game and seeing the lightning bolts on their helmets and the quick option offense. It's really one of the Air Force has a lot to do with me becoming a college football fan. It was really the first team I even remotely followed, and then obviously getting more and more into it. Those games look forward to on Saturday, but we actually have a pretty decent one going on tonight that has a few other question marks. The Texas Longhorns, who are still trying to dig themselves out of a hole, will play Iowa State tonight at 7:30. And the big story in this is senior quarterback David Ash is out for this game, and Case McCoy, the backup, will take the reins, who played a good portion in their win against the Kansas State earlier last week. What do you make for this game with Case McCoy and instead of David Ash?
I think if Case McCoy has a good outing tonight and they beat Iowa State, I think that Mac Brown needs to settle this quarterback debate. How long has it been since, hey, I'll ask you, Phil, who's Texas' quarterback? And we'll say, well, David Ash and Case McCoy. If he wins this game, they got a big win against Kansas State. Last time they played, they had a bye week last week, but 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then tonight, a Thursday nighter on the road to Iowa State, not an easy atmosphere. If Case McCoy goes there and plays good, I think Texas should stick with him.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be interesting to see how they play. We know what's going on with Texas, and all the spotlight will be on them, Mac Brown and that story. But just for Case McCoy, it seemed like this team rallied around him last week when he was in there, and we haven't seen Texas do that in a while. And maybe this can be a step in the right direction. If they can get some stability at quarterback, that's always big for a team. And hopefully they can right the ship tonight and play a good ball, and maybe Case McCoy can be the quarterback for the Longhorns and settle this debate once and for all.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at, this side by side. David Ash has had 7 touchdowns this year to 2 interceptions. Case McCoy only 1 touchdown through the air. But really, he's, I hate to use this word, but he kind of game manages the offense a little bit more than David Ash. But the way they're playing, they are doing more of a run-based attack that might, help out more. Both these kids are very talented. I know a lot of guys are behind Case McCoy, but a lot of it is the reason to who his older brother is. For those that don't realize, you're not seeing double. Case McCoy is the younger brother of Longhorn legend and now San Francisco 49er quarterback Colt McCoy, who led them to a national championship. At the time of him leaving, was the most winningest quarterback in college football history and a Heisman finalist. A lot of people latch on to the name and want to see a McCoy behind center again. But both these guys, I think they've handled it very well considering they've been 1A, 1B for very long. Not a lot of guys can handle it. You see how it worked in USC, not very well. You know, that old school style of if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. But, I mean, if David Ash, if he does return next week, because next week they got Oklahoma, so they need to settle any issues that they can before they face the Sooners.
Yeah, they don't need any question marks going into that game. They need to, all right, this is our quarterback, this is our game plan. The Sooners, we've talked about before from Mac Brown, this is a big game. They can't get killed. They cannot lose this game by a lot. If they lose a heartbreaker, they lose a good game, yeah, there might be some leniency considering what's been going on with Texas. Mm-hmm. Maybe they could be moving forward if they plan it up, but they can't get killed. And I just think going in there with two quarterbacks against Oklahoma is not a good thing.
Right.
I think the best thing that Mac Brown can do for the Longhorns is settle on a quarterback. Have the other kid ready to go just in case he's not performing. But it's tough as a quarterback when you're playing and you know if you make one mistake or you have a couple bad drives, you got the other guy looking over your shoulder.
Right.
It's tough to play like that. You have so much going on as a quarterback already. The last thing you know is be looking over your shoulder and wondering, okay, am I going to get the trigger here? Am I going to get pulled out of this game? And especially when they're playing Oklahoma, they need all their focus needs to be on the field. One quarterback, you're riding the ship today. We're behind you, and quarterbacks do play better that way. Obviously, if he doesn't get the job done, you can go to the next man. But I think that's the best interest for Mac Brown in Texas. For this game here, if Case McCoy proves he's good, which he's a pretty solid quarterback we've seen in the past.
Right.
If he can get the job done, I think we should name him the starter for next week against Oklahoma. I think it'll be the best fit and in the best interest for Texas against Oklahoma next week.
Well, I mean, both kids fairly solid, having around 60% completion percentage. I think the one thing that gives David Ash the edge is, Case McCoy, more of a pocket presence, whereas David Ash can break the pocket, make plays with his feet. He has a touchdown on the ground this year of 55 yards, and he has about 200 yards rushing to this offense through these first couple games. So I think that could give him the slight advantage because Case McCoy, unlike his brother, is not much of a runner.
No, he's not. He likes to sit in the pocket. He likes to throw. But I was just thinking about last week when they beat Kansas State. He played really well in that game.
Yes, he did.
And it seemed like the kids rallied around him. You don't always, sometimes you can look beyond what their capabilities are and just see what a football team does when they're in there, how they respond. And the Texas responded the best I've seen them in a long time when Case McCoy came in there and led them to victory over a Kansas State team that had their number in the past few years. So we'll see what happens tonight. All the spotlight will be on Texas, as it always is when they play. And we'll see how they do in Iowa State, which is a tough environment because if you remember a couple years ago, they knocked off Oklahoma State. So it'll be interesting to see what the Longhorns do tonight.
Texas, Ohio State, tonight at 7:30. Tune in. That's all the time we have for you today. Thank you guys for joining us. It's been a fun hour talking college football with you guys. Phil Nunziata, Ryan Mock. We'll see you next week. So they really had a linebacker playing quarterback?